Game of Thrones sucked. Okay, not really. But come on. We can all agree that the ending of Game of Thrones was probably the worst finale ever. Yeah, I know what you're thinking, but the Game of Thrones finale came out 5 years ago. Why are you making a video about it now? Well, because I want to. This is my YouTube channel, and I'll make videos about anything I want. So if you don't want to watch, feel free to click off. Okay. Wait! No, please don't! I was just joking. You know me, silly old prankster. Please don't leave. But seriously, I'm making a video about this because I just recently finished the show. Yes, I know, late to the party. Also, my friends are all sick of hearing me talk about how Jaime Lannister got robbed of the greatest character arc in television history. Now before I start this video, here's a disclaimer. Surprise, surprise, this video contains spoilers. So if you're someone who wants to watch Game of Thrones, I suggest you click off now. But if you're one of those people who say, yeah, I'll watch it someday, and then never actually start because you can't be bothered to commit to a new show, you might as well stay. Because let's be honest, we both know you weren't going to watch it anyways. Now, without further ado, Ivestragis Renegon, which actually means let's begin in High Valyrian. Trust me, I asked Danny. Okay, I'm mostly going to focus on Season 8 because let's be honest, that's when the show turned to complete garbage. Now let's start by talking about the creators of the show, D&D. Mr. Dumb and Dumber somehow managed to craft the greatest opening seasons a show has ever witnessed, building the most cult-like fan base that any show has ever seen, and then to thank us for our 8 years of unwavering loyalty to the show by spitting in our faces and serving us the steaming pile of feces they call a season finale. I mean, how do you go from directing the greatest wedding scene ever known to man to giving us a finale that feels like it's written by a toddler who's both blind and deaf at the same time? So here's the kicker. HBO actually offered D&D a generous 10 episodes to wrap up the final season, but these half-wits turned it down and insisted that the show could only be finished in 6 episodes. Like, I'm sorry, were you in that much of a rush that you couldn't even give us the 10 episodes we deserved? My bad for interrupting your plans, but hey, please go on about your day while we sit here picking up the pieces of our shattered expectations. So why did the show fall apart in the later seasons? Simple, they ran out of books. See, D&D are great story adapters. They can take an existing idea, like George R.R. Martin's work, and turn it into a great show. That's why the first 4 seasons were so amazing, because they were based on the books. But then George decided to go into hibernation and stop publishing books, meaning D&D had to become the new writers of the show. And let me tell you, writing storylines is not their strong suit. Now I'll give them credit. There were still good episodes after season 4, like the end of season 6, a masterpiece. But the character arcs were absolutely rubbish in the last season. Daenerys' character arc felt like eating a soggy sandwich. It's hard to describe the feeling, but you just know it's awful. The whole show, Dany is built up as this incredible queen, the savior of Westeros, destined to break the cycle of mad rulers, and then, out of nowhere, she goes off the rails. It's like the writers spend years crafting this perfect queen that everyone admired, only to chuck it out the window and call it a plot twist. Plot twist? More like plot missed. Then there's Jaime Lannister's arc, which might be the biggest letdown in Game of Thrones. In the early seasons, he's shown as the classic bad boy. He nearly kills Bran, sleeps with his sister, labeled as the Kingslayer, but over time, he becomes this complex, redeemable character that fans start rooting for. His journey from arrogant knight to someone who's slowly finding his honor was one of the best arcs of the show. He starts to get cozy with Brienne, and we get promised this happy ending with them, but nope. He's back to being the puppy that follows Cersei around and ends up dying. Under a pile of bricks. Bricks! Jaime Lannister, one of the greatest swordsmen in Westeros, who survived countless battles, gets taken out by fallen debris? Like, come on! They really wrote the best character arc in the show and then just toss it out the window. Speaking of character arcs, not all were bad. I feel that Theon Greyjoy and the Hound had perfect endings to their arcs. Theon starts off loyal to the Starks, who were like his second family, but ends up betraying them for his own blood. Then pays the price for it when Ramsay cuts his little pecker off. But then, Theon ends up meeting his fate like a hero, as he dies protecting Bran from the Night King. And then there's the Hound. He starts out as this terrifying brute, who after executing Ned Stark, eventually becomes Arya's travel buddy. Along the way, he grows a soft spot for her, and tries to teach her valuable lessons about revenge. But then Arya doesn't listen and still kills everyone, but that's a whole nother story. And then the last scene we see with the Hound is him facing off with his brother, where he finally confronts his demons and they both end up falling to their deaths together. So all in all, some character arcs serve their purpose. But I'll never forgive you for what you did to Jaime. I'd say the thing that pissed me off the most about the finale was Bran the Boring becoming king. Like seriously? You're telling me the character with the least screen time, who probably spoke 4 words in the entire last season, becomes king? How does that make any sense? This guy gets these insane powers that no one else has and does absolutely nothing with them. Not a single good thing came from him being the three-eyed raven. And to make matters worse, one of my favorite characters died saving him. The dude didn't even want to be king, yet somehow he gets elected because he has the best story? Please. I'd rather Joffrey the Gentle take the throne than this snooze fest. At least he was fun. I think the moment that sent Season 8 spiraling downhill was the Night King getting killed off so early. As much as I despise Cersei, I have to admit, the real villain of the show was the Night King. I mean, the show literally opens with White Walkers. That's how important they were to the entire plot of Game of Thrones. So when they killed him in episode 3, it felt like the climax hit way too soon. All the tension and build up from the previous 7 seasons was blown in the first half of season 8, leaving the final 3 episodes feeling totally anticlimactic. And don't even get me started on how the Night King died. Like, who invited you to the party, little miss? What's west of Westeros? No epic showdown between Jon and the Night King, no dramatic face-off where Jon finally gets his hero moment, just a boring battle between shadows. So get this, we're gonna make the most epic battle of all time, but we're gonna make everything super dark to make sure no one can see a thing. Genius. Jon Snow was the biggest waste of talent I've ever seen. We grow to know and love him as the hero of the show, and then he dies. Total shock. But wait, he comes back to life. Great, hooray, our favorite bastard is back. But then what the hell does he even do? He meets Dany, who somehow hypnotizes him into falling for her. They go from complete strangers to sleeping together like it's no big deal, all while being auntie and nephew, and then he becomes the most useless character in season 8. Jon being the son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark was one of the best plot twists of the show, but that's where the fun stopped. What good came from this revelation? Absolutely nothing. All it did was make it super awkward every time Jon and Dany kissed. Then, out of nowhere, Jon kills Dany because she goes full Mad Queen? And get this, despite the Unsullied being the most loyal army in Westeros, all they do is hold Jon prisoner and then ship him off to the Night's Watch. First of all, if the show followed logic, Grey Worm would have killed Jon on the spot. His queen, whom he vowed to serve, just died, and he watched the love of his life get slaughtered right in front of him. Why wouldn't he take out the guy who just destroyed his entire life's purpose? And secondly, what even is the Night's Watch anymore? The whole point of the Night's Watch was to protect Westeros from the White Walkers and the Wildlings, but the White Walkers are dead, and the Wildlings are basically besties with Jon. So sending him to the war made literally zero sense. As much as I didn't like Cersei, I have to admit her character was written perfectly. Up until they gave her that god-awful haircut. The bob cut era marked the beginning of her downfall. Cersei was a character who deserved a much better ending. I was okay with the fact that she died, everyone saw that coming. But the way she died. Seriously? One of the most well-written antagonists in the entire show got taken out by rubble? Tyrion was my favorite character in the show, until Dumb and Dumber ruined him. It can be argued that Tyrion is one of the most influential characters in the whole series. He starts off as one of the smartest characters in the show, but then he meets Dany and suddenly becomes a complete moron who keeps making mistakes. And instead of facing consequences for his mistakes, he just gets promoted to Hand of the King. Tyrion's character was completely obliterated in the last season. And to make matters worse, the writers thought it would be funny to add this little joke in at the end.
A Song of Ice and Fire. Archmaester Ebro's history of the wars following the death of King Robert.
I suppose I come in for some heavy criticism.
Oh, I wouldn't say that.
What does he say about me?
I
Don't believe you're mentioned.
Game of Thrones is easily one of the best shows I've ever watched, and the first couple seasons has the best writing I've ever witnessed. So it's just sad to see what potentially could have been the best show ever created getting thrown away in just 2 seasons. As bad as the finale was, it's still important to remember that the first couple seasons of Game of Thrones were quite literal perfection. And as difficult as it is to accept the fact that the ending was unfulfilling and quite literally garbage, that's just life. So I guess I'll just suck it up and move on. Don't get me wrong, the last season had some positive aspects too. The music was chef's kiss, the special effects were amazing, the acting too was top notch, but the only thing that let the entire show down was the writing, which is like the most important thing, so... I'm convinced a middle school student with a creative writing assignment could have written a better conclusion. And then Bran wakes up from his nap and realizes it was all a dream and they live happily ever after. The end.